What's up, y'all? It's Shuffle, and today's video is a 20 minutes till dawn starter guide. This game is really fun, and if you've played Vampire Survivors, this game is a lot like that in a good way. And it's also made by one person, to my knowledge anyway, Flan. So very cool stuff. But when I say it's like Vampire Survivors in a good way, I think that VS is going to be spawning a genre of games, which is pretty cool. So you're going to see a lot of those kind of follow suit probably in the next couple of years. And this game is actually pretty good follow-up to that. It's fun in its own way. It's more interactive than VS. VS is pretty brain off, and this isn't. So that's really cool. And also, it's 20 minutes instead of 30. You know, so that's different. And also, it's a different aesthetic. They kind of just took the formula of Vampire Survivors, but then changed like everything else involving it. So I've been greatly enjoying this. This game is cheap AF as well at $3 USD. And if you liked Vampire Survivors, I would recommend playing this. Yeah, so we're going to talk about the characters, give you some tips, how the game works, talk about runes and stuff. And like I said, tips with what I think is good, what synergies are pretty strong and stuff. And this is all early access, so it's subject to change. But I think fundamentally right now, this works. So let's see. Starting off, how does the game play? If you haven't played Vampire Survivors, this is kind of like a bullet hell type game where you get your character, you run around, you shoot monsters. There are little regular small monsters that do different things. A couple blow up, some shoot at you, some are just, you know, huge HP bags and stuff. And then there are elites and there are bosses that spawn every few minutes. Elites give you a chest that has XP and a power-up, but each character gets their own power-up. They have, I think, 3 of them, which is really cool. And then bosses drop tomes, and tomes are pretty build-defining. But a quick tip about tomes, you don't always have to take them. So if you see one that is like, if you see 2 that are really bad for you, and then one that's like marginally useful, don't feel pressured to take it. You can actually skip it and be fine. But yeah, so runes. These are passives that you can unlock for your characters. Some of these are really good for certain heroes, but right now, since I don't have that all maxed out, I've picked things that are pretty general, although I think Alacrity is probably better than Power at this point, just because Alacrity, like fire rate and reload rate, pretty much every build likes those things for the most part. Whereas not every build uses bullet or summon damage. Like if you go an elemental build, you don't need either of these, so it's just kind of a waste. So, but otherwise, I think the defensive ones are better than the offensive ones. Like getting Blessing is really cool because you get Holy Shield for free. You don't have to find it every run, and this actually gets pretty important later on. Some of these other ones, like I don't want to talk about them too long, but some of these other ones are either kind of niche or, you know, like there's no way to track kills, so getting a heal every 1500 kills, you have no idea when that's coming, you know. But if it drops it on the ground, you can look at it and kind of kite around it and then pick it up later. But also for the bottom tier stuff, I think Growth is probably the best defensive one, and I think Ethereal is probably the best offensive one. So these are just general ones I use, but definitely feel free to use your own stuff. When you first start playing, you're going to find a few spots where you're probably dying consistently, or at least that was my experience. And I think the hardest parts of the runs right now are the 15-minute mark, because that's when the first boss spawns, and it's a pretty decent DPS check, but also kind of a target priority check. Some builds want to burn down the boss as fast as possible, and other builds want to kill all the other monsters and just wait out the 1-minute timer before the box goes away. So either one is applicable depending on your build. And so after the first boss, it's pretty chill for a little bit, and then from 12 to 10 minutes, it feels like the enemy spawn rates goes up drastically. So there's just a flood of the little dudes from the start, and I think they have a bit more HP than before. So if you have no like good AoE or no strong damage or bounce or anything like that, you will probably die here because there's just so many dudes, and if you're not killing them quickly, then you're just going to get overwhelmed. It doesn't matter if they're just little dudes with no HP. If you don't have a lot of pierce, bounce, damage, or AoE or something like that, then they're just going to maul you. After you get through that, the game actually is pretty chill for almost the rest of the run after that. Once the wave is done from 10 minutes on or whatever, you get different monsters, and those monsters don't spawn in too thick of a density, but something to note for that is that if you had a really bad build that struggled to get to 10 minutes, you still have a pretty good chance of dying here because there aren't a lot of enemies that spawn. So if you're behind on XP, you're not going to catch up quickly. And also you need way more DPS also than you did before. You need like good single target DPS instead of AoE DPS. So you're kind of getting checked every few minutes for different stuff in your build, but once you get used to it, you'll start, you know, getting through runs or getting deep into runs pretty consistently outside of, you know, making some mistakes. The final about 5 minutes are only difficult if you don't have Shatter or a lot of bounce and pierce or AoE. Single target still matters, but not as much. So you only need single target for a couple spots in the game, and then you need a lot of like AoE and stuff later on. So those are the mechanics of how the game plays and what I think are the hardest parts. So let's talk about the characters. I'm currently up to Darkness 10, and Darkness is like an ascension level thing where every time you beat the game you get a new level of it and different stuff comes up. It's mostly just, you know, more enemies, more enemy HP. Some enemies do more damage and stuff, or they move faster. And it's a little bit of a difficult scaling unless you start really focusing on runes. And so once you have some pretty good runes and you're familiar with the characters, then it does feel noticeable, but you should be okay. So let's see, let's talk about these heroes. Check out my notes here. Okay, so for the heroes, I played them all, you know, up to what you see here. This is the highest darkness I've cleared with each one. So every time I beat the game, I try someone else, and I just go up that way. I gotta try Hina again soon. She's the next one I'm gonna do. Spark is really easy, so I'm not really concerned with her being a 4. Okay, so Shayna gets, for her ability, she can reroll upgrades once per level. This is insane. This makes it so any weapon build you try to do with her, she can consistently get to it. And since she can do that, there is also, I believe it's Darkness 9, you get one less upgrade choice when you level. And so this power gets even better because you have more chances to get stuff you want. So Shayna, she's good at all times, but she really shines when you get to higher difficulties, just because she can make her builds really consistent. And she gets, for passive things from the elites, she gets more XP gained, she gets triples the effect of the next upgrade. Not everything can be tripled, so you gotta be careful, like Holy Shield. Some of those upgrades can't be tripled, but things like, you know, extra damage or extra bullets and stuff like that, you can triple those, and she gets, you know, ridiculous. And one of her last upgrade is a halo, and it gives you like bonus fire rate, reload, movement speed, or something like that. And that's pretty good too. That's really good for all builds. Otherwise, I think Shayna's really good. You can pick anything you want with her, and she'll do fine. You just have to know the synergies that are out there. Diamond is a bit tough, actually. Like, all she gets is more HP. This doesn't translate to build consistency. This doesn't translate to damage. It's just survivability, and killing enemies is better to keep you alive than just having more HP. But having more HP still isn't a bad thing. She gets some synergies, like when she regains HP, she gets like bonus stats. I forget exactly what they are off the top of my head, but the beauty of having extra HP for Diamond is that there are some slower builds out there, or some riskier builds you can start working towards that really need some like deep investments for abilities that she can take because she can survive. And she's not really great early on, but once you start getting runes, specifically like growth, where she can heal every, you know, 5 levels, this applies to everyone, you can get those synergies, like regaining health gives her bonus stats and stuff really easily. So she gets much better the further into the game you get, especially because once you get to higher darkness and stuff, enemies are, you know, more plentiful, they live longer and stuff, so accidents happen, and she can stay alive for quite a while. So that's kind of her strength. She gets much better later. As far as weapons and stuff goes, and she doesn't really have any weapon-based synergy, you can pick whatever you want with her. So you can pick, like, you know, SMGs with Elemental, Shotgun with Frost is really good too, or pretty much anything you can think of, she can make it work. Scarlet, you like, your first thought is probably the flame cannon's really good for her, and it's all right because she gets, you know, the burn stuff. This third shot, the fire wave, it's like a infinite pierce, like phoenix that goes flying out across the screen, and it hits, you know, everything in its path where you're aiming. So you could run the flame cannon, but she's also really good with SMG. So any elemental character, if you're not going to use something specific, you want SMGs, because SMGs synergize the best of them right now. And so you can run flame cannon. I've done that to success. You can run her with SMGs and maybe bat gun, but I think SMGs are probably the best one to use. Otherwise, her ability is all right. It does some okay damage. So if you get a slow start, she can, you know, keep you in the game. But otherwise, I don't think she's too impressive. She's probably one of the weaker characters. I'd say like her and Diamond are near the bottom, like for the impromptu tier list. And that's not that they're bad, but that's just what I feel after playing them. Kina, I gotta play her again. She's actually pretty tough to use here. So whenever you right click, she summons a shadow clone that like does a melee attack around it, and it's equal to your bullet damage. So any bullet damage based skills, I usually go with grenade launcher or crossbow or revolver, maybe shotgun, because these have really high base damage, with grenade launcher having the highest base. And so if you go bullet builds, you can use her with that. I would say crossbow might be the better choice for her. Grenade launcher is a bit tricky to use, even though it's really good and high damage. But otherwise, I would say she's probably one of the weaker characters right now. So I'd say the other characters are much stronger than these three. But otherwise, you know, she's fun, she's cool. And I can't remember if the clone scales off of summon damage as well, but definitely bullet damage. So, you know, you don't have to go elemental with her, just go bullet damage and she should be all right. Spark is nuts. She's really strong. Just get SMGs, get Electro Mage. That's like that's the lightning ability. And, you know, you get all the synergy, fire rate, and she'll just mow through everything. She's a really strong character. And all you need are SMGs, and she's good to go. Really nothing else there. It's just fire rate, elemental chance, and stuff like that, and the boosts, all the elemental synergy, bullet bounce, and all that. And you just hold down the left click, and she'll mow through everything. Really strong character. Lilith is interesting because she takes a little bit to get rolling. She has one specific elite upgrade that she needs to find. Otherwise, she does feel a lot worse. And that is the one where when you kill an enemy, because she spawns a spirit every time you kill an enemy. And one of her elite bonuses is when she kills an enemy, it spawns 2 spirits. And so you can get a bunch of summon damage. And once you have her with the grenade launcher, obviously, so you get like the light weaponry, the flying dagger, and the scythe, and the grenade launcher, bullet damage, summon damage, dragon, stuff like that. You will not have to click with this character. She'll get to a point, or she'll have like stretches of literal minutes where you kill like 2 things, and there's so many like ghosts, swords flying through the air, and the dragons going off and stuff, the extra ghosts that you have from the general ability, the neutral ability that everyone can pick up. And you just see things flying all over the screen, and she just wipes out the screen. And it's a lot of visual noise, so you can still get hit by stuff if it doesn't die immediately, so you have to pay attention. But she definitely doesn't need to shoot too much near the end of the game, but it's still good to have something like the grenade launcher so you can, you know, do damage to bosses. That's where you're gonna need it. And then finally, Abby with the Batgun, I think, is the best combo, just because like Abby and Batgun is the most brain off way to play this game. It just does so much like damage and effect chance, and her special skill where you right click, she dumps all of her ammo in like a couple seconds. But there's so many ways to get extra ammo or infinite ammo, like ethereal or fire rate and stuff, that, you know, you'll have like a 16 round magazine on the Batgun, but it just doesn't run out. And you can just right click and she'll go for like 30 seconds of just shooting. For her, you want like a bunch of bullet bounce, maybe some pierce, all the elemental things you can get, and she'll easily win. Like I have not played a build with someone yet that was easier than Abby and Batgun, except maybe Spark. Spark's pretty easy too. To wrap up the video, I got a few tips here for you. So the first one is elemental builds are the safest and easiest so far in early access. A lot of characters can make them work. A lot of weapons can make them work. Only a few of them don't really excel, but elemental is usually a safe build to go. Even if you don't want to go an elemental build, that's totally fine. If you go a bullet based build, then I would still suggest getting Frost Mage, just because Frost Mage is probably the best skill right now, in my opinion. It's one of the best for sure. And that's because, for one, it can freeze everything, so it's not running at you and you have a chance of not taking damage, which is very helpful. 2, it scales no matter how high the enemy's HP gets, because Frostbite is the tier 2 ability where if you freeze an enemy, it takes 25% of its life as damage immediately. So that effectively cuts every enemy you're fighting down to 75%, except for bosses. Bosses only take 1%, but you can freeze them multiple times, obviously. And then the final thing of note in the Frost Mage tree is Shatter makes it so when you kill an enemy, it explodes and does damage based on its HP to everything around it. And this is insane for literally any build, because if you're elemental, you're doing a bunch of damage with some control, and if you're a bullet build, you do a bunch of high damage, and then you Frostbite Shatter them, and you just wipe out literal waves and clusters of enemies every time Shatter goes off. And since it scales with the enemy's HP, it doesn't matter how strong the enemies get, you're always going to be doing damage that matches it. So Frost Mage right now is incredibly powerful. The other thing about Frost Mage 2 is you don't need to pick it right away. When you're starting out, you should be getting more damage or projectiles or other things that are synergistic to your build. And then like once you have a good amount of damage or bounce or pierce or something in your mid game, then you can start building Frost Mage. You're going to need it after about 12 minutes. That's usually where it starts to kind of shine. But once you get to the end of the game, it's really good, especially in the last 5 minutes. My third tip here is for weapons. If you decide to go for a slower, high damage weapon like crossbow or grenade launcher or even pistol, you should be focusing on things like bullet damage and pierce or bounce. Usually you don't want to stack pierce and bounce together. They're just not that synergistic, but I guess you could if you really wanted to. But the thing you shouldn't do is get bounce with grenades. If you're using the grenade launcher, you want pierce just because you want the bullets to go away from you before they explode. If you pick a low damage but high fire rate weapon, then you should be trying to make an elemental build just because that's the more natural synergy for it. You can definitely do bullet damage builds with these, but if you're using, you know, dual SMGs or bat gun, then you want pyro, electro, and frost mage, and then you want as much fire rate and ammo and bounce that you can get. You want these bullets to bounce and hit everything they can nearby. And other things like Splinter, where enemies explode into bullets, is really helpful. And the goal is to just spread all three of your elements to everything as quickly as possible. And then the more fire rate you have, the more lightning procs you get, which is more damage. Finally, for summoner builds, Dragon is kind of a trap in some ways. It's pretty tough to make Dragon work. It's usually better to take Dragon at the start of the game because you get more time to ramp it up. But anytime you can gain a lot of XP quickly, so you can get all Dragon's passives together, isn't actually a bad thing either. You just have to make sure you have enough damage to survive until Dragon hatches. The best part of a summon build, in my opinion, is light weaponry, so the flying daggers and the flying scythe. Those do really good, consistent damage, and they enable a lot of other things in the summoner kit, and it keeps you very safe. So I'd rather focus on that before anything else. Alright y'all, that's gonna do it for this one. Thanks for watching. I will be uploading more of my 20 minutes till dawn runs on the channel just because I really enjoy the game and I want to show off some of the stuff I talked about. Enjoy the content, give it a thumbs up, let me know what you're thinking down below in the comments. Check out the links in the box for Discord, Twitter, Twitch, Patreon, all of that awesome stuff, and I will see y'all next time.